Hey Skelly, so I tried taking a look at Windows 8. Down this name on YouTube. I tried to install a demo of Windows 8 into a virtual machine and failed. So I had to go on YouTube and look up some other people running through the interface and see what's going on. Well, I discovered a few things. Number one, Microsoft does not give a crap about the interface. The interface, how people use their next operating system, Windows 8, is not important. What is important is the App Store. Microsoft will have an App Store connected to their next operating system. They see Apple making money hand over fist on everyone else's software that runs on their operating systems. So if memory serves, Apple gets something like 30% of everything that someone makes. So if you sell your software on the Apple Store, 30% of it goes to Apple, and if you sell it somewhere else for another operating system, you can't sell it for any more on the Apple Store. You have to sell it for the same price on the Apple Store you sell it elsewhere. That way, Apple gets their percentage, but you get screwed because you're losing 30% on their operating system. The interfaces in it is unimportant to Microsoft. The whole idea is to put you in a sandbox and to basically ram everything from Microsoft down your throat. They're learning this from Apple. So let's talk about the interface a little bit. From what I could tell, everything runs full screen, which makes sense on a phone and on a tablet, but not always on a computer. So not only does everything run full screen, but they have methods of sharing data between applications, but I really didn't notice any way to highlight text without a mouse or to copy and paste, again, without a mouse and a keyboard. So I'm not sure how that mechanism is going to work. I know it has to, but the interface is going to be much different. And there's no right click, because if you stop and think about it, there's no way to right click. There's only either you're touching the screen or you're not. Either you're moving your finger or you're not, and that's pretty much the interface that you have with control. So there's no right click menu of any sort. I've seen this happen on GNOME 3, for example. There's no right click anymore because they're trying to do the same thing. This is also happening on Unity, which is Ubuntu's version of an interface. Both GNOME and Unity are trying to make one interface fit everything. Now, there's something else. There's something interesting about the Windows interface. It just doesn't look intuitive to me. Because, for example, if you're on one side of the screen, you wiggle your finger a certain way, and that's how you do the Alt-Tab type thing, where you switch between programs. And you click and move a little bit, and it brings up a context menu. But the thing is, how are you supposed to explain that to someone over the phone? I mean, okay, take your finger and place it halfway up the screen on the left-hand side, and then move your finger in towards the middle of the screen, but stop about a third of the way over because you have to stop there and wait for the context menu to pop up. Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. How are you supposed to explain to someone remotely how to do this kind of stuff, how to do these finger gestures? The same finger gesture at the side of the screen does one side of the screen does one thing, the other side of the screen does something else. Top, bottom, all different actions happen for the same basic finger gestures. So what this tells me is these are not intuitive things. These are just more interface mechanisms you're going to have to memorize to make everything work. And that is just wrong. I've seen an infant learn how to use an iPad. And it's because the interface doesn't have just written in concrete things you have to do to get things done. You basically just move your hands around and you can figure out what's going on. And the interface that I saw demonstrated doesn't do that for Windows 8. I just don't see that happening. What I envision happening with all of these tablet devices, with all of this kind of an interface, I picture you having a large screen up above, which you display all of your media and that sort of thing on, and a smaller screen down below that really takes the place of your mouse and keyboard, and you use that smaller screen to manipulate what's going on the big screen, or to handle things in the background, to be your game controller, to be your mouse, keyboard, other input devices. So you'll have a small screen, and then you might have one or two large screens in front of you at a desk. I've actually seen people do this at work, and it wasn't even control situation. It was just a convenience situation. They had a laptop sitting in between two larger monitors, and the larger monitors weren't even hooked to the laptop, I don't believe. I believe they were just hooked to the other computer. But it was just convenience for them. And I picture that happening with this whole tablet situation. So let's move on to Windows 9. Things like Microsoft Office have to work. There has to be a solution for Microsoft Office. There has to be a solution for things like CorelDRAW or other drawing packages, Photoshop, video editing software. All of these needs have to be addressed at some point, or people won't buy their software. They'll go buy a Mac because these things are satisfied on a Mac. So they have to supply something that will work for these niches. So what I envision from Windows 9 is you will have to have certified software, and that certification will cost money. What gets me is, what this leads into for me is open source. What's open source going to do? Because they're not going to pay to be certified on an operating system. There's no point for them to do this. It's not going to pay them back because they're open source. They're not going to make money on it. So what's going to happen? Either Microsoft and Apple and others are going to have to provide a way for open source software to come into the operating system, to come into that ecosystem that they're all, or a sandbox that they're all creating and thrive there, or open source is going to have to go hardware and make their own hardware as well as software, which is money. You know, if you go back into you're forced to spend money on hardware. Hardware physically eats up money. I mean, there's no way around it at that point. So this is a move by the big guys to squeeze out the little guys again. You're not going to be able to be just any podunk software guy who has a great idea, makes it happen, sticks it on a web page, starts raking in money from people buying your product. And you better not make too good of a product, because something has happened on Apple. I've heard of a couple of these. I'm trying to find an example where a free piece of software had a really good idea, started implementing it, and then Apple kicked them off the store because they didn't want a really good idea to be free. They wanted someone to come along and charge an arm and a leg for it. That way Apple gets their 30%. And the same thing is going to happen on Microsoft, of course, because I can understand this from Microsoft's point of view. They're in it for the money. Microsoft is just like General Motors, it's just like every other big company. General Motors doesn't make cars. General Motors makes money. Cars are a side effect. So I have one goofy prediction. I predicted in, 5 years, you won't have a mouse or a keyboard plugged into a computer anymore. What you'll have is you'll have multiple screens. And on those screens, you will have the mechanism to control what you see and what's going on. And you will have the screen itself. I also predicted one other thing, and that is blind people will be left out in the cold. I've looked at the way that some of these devices are trying to solve the problem of blind people using their devices. And I swear to God, I'm not making this up. One of them was talking about as you move your finger across the screen on the tablet, it'll buzz when you cross a line, or it'll read things out underneath your finger. What you need is an operating system designed not to require vision to make it work. And that's not happening with these tablet devices. Everybody's putting so much effort in these tablet devices that I fear there's not any effort being put into creating a system for blind people to use a computer, to use something like a computer or a phone or a tablet, whatever, and it not require vision to operate and get the most out of it. So what do you think? Has anybody out there got any other better ideas? Tell me what you think Windows 10 is